I'm so nervous.
There's no reason to be nervous. We're just talking.
We're just talking. We're just talking about our lives.
Do you want to go
with
first?
A bunch of strangers.
Ladies first.
Sure. So we have to come with an intro.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. It's Sam and Cristina. Welcome to our podcast.
Welcome to our podcast.
Ads coming soon.
Don't know why you're here.
You must be very bored. You said, "Oh, that has no views. I'll be the first to do that."
Like to be that first, don't you?
Hashtag watch/listen.
Welcome to the Non-Traditionalist podcast. I'm Cristina.
I'm Sam.
And we are the Non-Traditionalists. On this podcast, we talk about anything that has to do with living a non-traditional life. So we'll talk a lot about our lives, about others' ways of living a non-traditional life, the way we live a non-traditional life.
We'll talk about other people's lives.
We'll talk about other people's lives. We'll sit in judgment.
As we all do as humans.
As we all do. But yeah, so anything that has to do with non-traditional, we will talk about on this podcast. So if you're here, it's because you are interested in those things, I think, or you want to sit in judgment of us. So Sam and I have been together for almost 11 years. We have been married for almost 7. Our 7-year wedding anniversary is coming up.
We were married at a very young age.
A long, long time ago.
In a galaxy far, far away.
And we just recently moved full-time into an RV camper. That was on March 22nd. So we've been living full-time in the camper for a little over a month now. Yeah. And we just set out on our first big road trip. We were based in Savannah, Georgia previously. We are heading up to Portland, Maine for the summer. So we are recording this podcast out of Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina.
In the RV.
In the RV. We live in the RV with our 2 dogs and our 2 cats. We have 4 animals and we love it. And
they're looking at us so judgmentally right now.
Yes, because they're not involved in this. We wanted to start this podcast just to talk about, why we chose this lifestyle. We'll cover a lot of things about what it's like to live in an RV, what it's like to live on the road, but not just like our specific way of living non-traditionally. We wanted to talk about all the different ways that people live non-traditionally, different ways to make money that aren't a 9-to-5 job, different ways to live. We hope to have guests on, anybody that's living, in not a traditional way, how they do it, what they do for work, what their days to days look like, a whole bunch of things like that. So if you're interested in any of those things, stick around.
Yeah, we'll see where it goes. I mean, with the changing landscape of life in America and the world now, there'll be a lot of different ways to live, and I think people getting to hear other humans existing in a way that is not the way that they've been told is the only way to live or the only way to be successful, happy, or fulfilled is huge. Mm-hmm. That's one of the gifts of the internet.
Yeah.
With all of its downfalls, one of the gifts is getting to see that there is another way to be, and then that there's so many options. And I mean, another thing about being non-traditional is some of it was traditional at different ages too.
That's true. That's very true.
That's another part that I think will be interesting.
Well, and that goes to like the idea and the conversation that led to, what I'm sure a lot of people have thought in their life, we should start a podcast. Was we were talking about how even today, how rigid even the idea of a non-traditional lifestyle has become. So for us, when we are talking about a traditional life, we are talking about like the very classic, work hard, go to college, get a 9-to-5 job with good benefits, get married, have kids, buy a house, live the rest of your life that way. Like that is really what we mean by traditional life. And to us, anything outside of that really, I think in today's culture counts as non-traditional. But also, when we were talking about this, we found that even in our like own mindsets, the non-traditional life has kind of become a stereotype too. Like there's only a few different ways that you can live outside of that 9 to 5 world.
Right.
And in all reality, it's like the more people that we meet, the more conversations that we have. Like there are people who have jobs that I'm like, I did not, even for one moment of my entire life, think that somebody got paid to do that.
Right.
You know, there are so many different ways to live. There are so many different ways to make money. There are so many different ways to do all of these different things that we don't necessarily get a ton of exposure to. So that's why we wanted to make this a broader, like the non-traditionalists, of all of those different possibilities for people.
We're talking about the non-promoted, non-known, or the unknown.
The unknown.
The unknown
The
traditional.
unpopular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we're both servers and bartenders, and we've been in the service industry for, I guess, maybe 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're so old.
Yep. Really old. We're all 153 years old, but
Yeah.
And counting. But yeah, so that being said, when serving in the last couple of months, talking about the RV, I've actually met tons of people that live out of their RVs and are singers or are artists, or they also do something online.
Mm-hmm.
So there's really interesting lifestyles around the nomadic, non-traditional life, which is probably the first thing we're going to mostly speak about.
Yeah, what it's like to be nomadic.
But we're very new to that.
We're
very new to that. And, you know, one of the reasons we're nomadic, to get into a little history of it, is we were in the hurricane Helene.
Hurricane Helene in Florida.
Yeah, so the 7-foot, 8-foot waves, we were living on the water, and those went through our apartment complex and completely shut down the first level. The first level is still just not even walls. It's just wooden planks, bones put together still, and that's been 9 months now.
Mm-hmm.
8 months, I think. So that is kind of what got us thinking, okay, well, we had to go from St. Petersburg, Florida, where that happened, all the way back to Savannah, and we had to live a very non-traditional life. In fact, we lived in a FEMA housing for a month, which was a hotel, and went from 1,100 square feet down to 320 for an entire month, and realized this wasn't horrid. It just wasn't our space.
Yeah.
So we had to live non-traditionally for the last 7, 8, 9 months. And it's just opened our eyes to a lot of other possibilities. You know, when you lose 90% of what you ever owned in one moment, it opens you up for a lot of options, actually.
As for those of you who don't know, Hurricane Helene hit St. Petersburg, Florida, the Tampa Bay area, on September 26th, I believe, of 2024. And then about a week later, there was another hurricane called Hurricane Milton.
What a terrible name.
So we chose not to evacuate because even though we were on the water, our apartment complex was on a secure hospital power grid. And the biggest concern in hurricanes is actually loss of power. And the building we were in, we had been told, hadn't flooded in the 60 years that it was built. Because it had a seawall and all of those things, but then, record hurricane. And so we did leave for Milton. We went up to Chattanooga, Tennessee. That was a 13-hour car ride. We had a lot of time to talk about basically what do we do next. And the more that we talked about that and what we wanted out of our lives and all of those things, the more we kind of came to the same conclusion, which was the more we tried to live a traditional life. We were never truly living like our definition of a traditional life, but the more we tried to at least reach for aspects of that, the less our life really worked for us.
Yeah, I feel like the reason being to get like metaphysical about it is we were trying to live based on somebody else's idea of a good life, not what we actually wanted. It's kind of like anything in life when we outsource direction, or we try to let somebody else run our lives, whether it's through social media, movies, or what everyone has told us is what is good. Our lives fell apart catastrophically, and it was probably the most obvious one.
What's the hurricane?
A hurricane, just.
Yeah. So in that car ride, when we were talking about kind of where we wanted to go from here, and we had that realization about living non-traditionally. we kind of got back to, like, for years we have talked about moving into some kind of van and RV. And there's always been, like, a reason not to, whether that be financial security, like our animals. At one point,
space was one of the biggest things.
We always talked about a van because, like, our perception of, like, an RV was that was something that wasn't, that, like, we couldn't financially do. Like, we had a perception that RVs were crazy expensive. A lot of RVs are maybe more expensive than what we were looking at. But when we kind of got down to it and we were like, this is something we have talked about our entire marriage, was living nomadically, getting on the road, you know, being able to explore all of these kinds of things. And we just decided that, you know what, we're just going to go for it. We're going to make it happen. We realized that there are a lot of options for RVs that were significantly less than we thought. So we decided to take the plunge. And we've kind of just been making it up as we go along from here.
Well, and I think that's an interesting point to bring up, though, to talk about. And sorry for anybody listening on their headphones. I just talked really loud. But yeah, we didn't even look up what an RV cost because we thought that.
Yeah, it was just a perception we had of what a lifestyle looked like.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting too, because when you talk about living traditionally, there's the perception we all know. I feel like everybody has like this cookie cutter. Like maybe there's a few things that are different about what traditional life is, but we all pretty much have that thing. And when non-traditional comes up, it's like we also had a thing that we thought, like, oh, that's unattainable, or people that own those RVs, they're retired wealthy people from New York or whatever, or they're all from California. They went from $1 million home to a $250,000 RV.
Yeah,
and those exist. Don't get me wrong.
We've met a lot of them already.
But like what ours cost and what it looks like, I would have thought it was twice, maybe 3 times as much as what it actually costs.
Yeah.
And so what in our lives are we just going, oh, that's just what it is, because that's our perception, not, let me actually look into it.
Right. I think that and that's one, again, goes back to one of the reasons we want to start this podcast. Going back to the format of this podcast, we are, like we said, we'll talk about a lot of things, but as we were creating it, we were like, okay, so this is going to be a non-traditional podcast. So one of the things we wanted to keep within that is the free flow of life.
Yeah, we'll find out what we're speaking about when we speak.
Right. So we will have general concepts for each episode, a conversation idea that we'll go in with. And some of them we might stick to the script completely. Some of them we might end up talking about completely different things.
You can call it the Tangent Podcast. Yeah, this is going to be tangent.
So you guys are really just along for the ride with us as we create something in the moment. Like, we are creating this lifestyle as we are creating this podcast. We want to take you guys on the journey with us. It's going to be a lot of different things. And if there's anything that you guys want to hear us talk about, of course, let us know. Our idea for today, beyond introducing ourselves and what we're doing, was to talk about kind of how we ended up here. Like, what about our lives led us to this point. Yes. And a lot of this for us, like, we both had very untraditional childhoods. And that very much shaped the way that we view the world and the things that we wanted out of life. And so we're going to talk about, like, I'll talk a little bit about mine. Sam will talk a little bit about his. But I think the common denominator between our childhoods was actually the fact that we were both homeschooled. We were both homeschooled for different reasons, in different ways, for different amount of time. But that, of course, was like, we started our lives in society, if you will, in a non-traditional way, which was being homeschooled. So I don't know if you want to go first. Do you want me to go first?
No, you can go ahead and go first. I mean, let's see, you're 32.
I'm 32.
Yeah, this was our birthday month, 32. Actually. Yeah. April 6th, April 28th.
Yeah.
So I'd say you go ahead and go first because you were homeschooled for half the time I was.
Yeah.
And I definitely think it'd be interesting to talk about how long ago that was.
Yeah.
You know, it was 1995 when you started, born 94, 95, or 96. Was it 96?
I was born in 93.
So you were 4 or 5 when you started being homeschooled.
Maybe 4? I don't know.
Yeah, so it was a lot less common in 1997. And I think that's why it's interesting.
Yes.
And I think it's good to set the timeline for everyone here because, you might go homeschooling. I know 300 homeschoolers. You do now,
right?
But in
Especially
1997,
pre-2020.
yeah, we're talking about post 2020. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot more people being homeschooled because pretty much everybody was for one whole year. Everybody did something like that, but I think the way that we were homeschooled was even, I mean, for me, even more fringe and non-traditional than hers. So I'd like you to go first, personally, and then I'll go.
Yeah.
And then I'll have a comparison for everyone.
I, was homeschooled up until 6th grade. And the plan was never for my family to be homeschooled. For that, the time period is important. So I was born in 1993.
Now I know.
Now you know.
That's good.
My dad was a classical musician, which shaped a lot of how I viewed the world, because I got the example from a young age of somebody who just outright pursued their passion as their career. My mom really wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. So we made a lot of, from this perspective, I would say sacrifices in order to be able to do that. We didn't have a lot of money growing up, but it never really felt that way to me. The only reason that I knew that we didn't have a lot of money was because most people who are homeschooled, especially in the 1990s, did have a lot of money. And so the people that I was around, I could see clearly the difference between their lifestyle and ours. But I never felt like I was lacking in my childhood, I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely government institutions set for homeschooling now. You can actually get money for the curriculum. Back then, imagine a quarter of the curriculum is what exists, if maybe a tenth. And all of it was very expensive, and you had to support yourself for all of the purchasing of the curriculum.
Yeah.
On top of having somebody there to educate you, which meant a stay-at-home mom, which meant half the income. So, like, to paint that picture, it became very obvious for Cristina that she grew up below most people's means.
Yes. We actually were homeschooled. So the reason we were homeschooled, again, very different from Sam, which he'll get into. So my sibling is the smartest person I've ever met. If you're listening, AC, you are. Let's just be honest.
Genius.
Yeah. So, and there might be like certain details that I mess up in this story, but my memory of this basically scenario that led us to be homeschooled was AC is 3 years older than me, and they went to public school. It was a public school that was right across the street from our house, and they were having issues, and a lot of the issues centered around, like, one, they were bored, and two, the other kids were bullying them for how smart they were. That was my understanding of the situation. And at some point, the situation reached a head, and my mom went to the school to talk to them about what could be done to create a better experience for AC. And the only solution that the school had at the time was for AC to skip a grade.
Yeah, because this is definitely Oklahoma, which is 49th in education. Just going to go ahead and throw that out there. Sometimes 50th, but one of the lowest in education. They definitely did not have gifted programs.
So this was pre-gifted programs really being a thing.
Yeah.
And I think, honestly, even if that was an option, my mom wouldn't have taken it, because it was the same concept as skipping a grade. So, like, let's take this child who is already struggling in school socially because of their intellect and put them in a grade above them and put them in that situation. Like, that just didn't feel like an actual solution to my mom.
I mean, I think it's intelligent the way they went about it, because they basically homeschooled you until they felt like they could give you the education that you needed.
Yes.
And then when they felt above water, or out of their league, or whatever you want to say,
right,
they put you into some schooling. So so I'll let you talk more about that, but I just think that's interesting. Like, I just feel a lot of respect for your mother going out on a limb and doing that, and I think she went about it in a really positive way.
Yeah,
and that's just cool.
I loved being homeschooled.
You know, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so for me, I absolutely adored being homeschooled. We did get socialized. My mom signed us up for every homeschool program that existed in Tulsa. We went to a homeschool art class. We went to a homeschool gym class. And there were a few other things we did like that. But, and this is kind of how everything ties together, the reason that I loved being homeschooled so much was not necessarily just the fact that I got to learn at my own pace and all of those fun things, but because of the way it allowed my family to overall live. So my dad being a classical musician, kind of what that looks like is a typical season for a classical musician runs from about September to about April, depending on the specific orchestra that they work with. And my dad is also what is called a music librarian. So the way I describe that is basically every piece of music that touches the stage goes through my dad. He orders it. He makes sure that all of the parts match the conductor's script. Like he is literally running the library of music. Over the summer, a lot of classical musicians participate in different programs that are like summer series programs. Yeah. My dad worked as both a classical musician and a music librarian for one in Greensboro, North Carolina, called the Eastern Music Festival. So we were there for about 8 weeks every summer. Then my dad also worked for a traveling conference of musicians. So we would travel somewhere else after Greensboro that changed every year. We also, when I was younger, took a lot of time to go see family. My godparents live in Ohio. We would go see them. So the like path I remember is we would leave Oklahoma, we would drive to Ohio, we'd spend a couple weeks there, we'd drive to North Carolina, we'd spend time there, we'd go up to New York, we'd spend time there, and we'd go home. We would drive up to New York for Christmases, basically any chance that we got. And on the way, my mom really took an opportunity to educate us along the way. So I learned most of my history by going to historic historic forts.
There are some historic forts.
There are historic forks at historic forts. So like I've been to Roanoke, that was like a big one. We spent a whole day in Roanoke.
Roanoke Rapids?
Sam really
Oh, you went to Roanoke? The cool North Carolina Roanoke?
Sam really thought that we were going to Roanoke, not Roanoke.
That's like going to Cape Hope,
But
you think you're going to Cape Fear?
Hi Stormy.
Cape
Are you
Courageous.
a podcaster now?
What's up? You doing a podcast?
We have a guest appearance of Stormy.
Hello,
Stormageddon, Dark Lord of all.
Dark Lord of all. Anyway, so you're saying you went to Roanoke.
So I've been to Gettysburg. I've been to
Not as cool as Gettysburg. Gettysburg is where we're close to right now.
And we would spend like the whole day there. Like I learned how to make butter in an actual churn. I learned how to loom on a huge loom. I was also in Girl Scouts, so I learned a bunch from there. So we got a whole bunch of different experiences growing up, and I felt like we spent most of my childhood traveling. Those are like all of my core memories of my childhood are traveling. So putting all of that together, like from the time that I stopped whenever I went to middle school. So I was homeschooled until 6th grade. My sibling got a scholarship to a very good private middle school. And my mom felt, like Sam was saying earlier, like this school could actually provide the level of education that matched AC's intellect and our development. So, and that was just the choice. And then we went to a very good public high school from there. So my lifestyle drastically changed in 6th grade. And at the time, I really wanted it. Like I, had been watching all of these other kids live this traditional life. And I was like, that sounds really cool. Like we got a lot of questions growing up. A lot of people were like, don't you feel like your child is missing something? Like all of this stuff got put on us about the way that we lived our life. Mm-hmm. And that made me feel like I was missing out on something important. And so I was really excited at first. Middle school was not a good time for Cristina. Really bad. Didn't actually end up enjoying it. High school was better. College was worse. That was kind of it for me, It's just my childhood. Thought I was missing something. Tried to live a traditional life. Hated it.
Sure.
But at that point, I was an adult and I didn't really see any other way. I was like, but I need to have a job, but I need to have this, but I need to do this. And I was like, I just kept feeling like if I could get to this point, like I could reach a level within, like if we could